Hi, I'm Peggy Farron. Thanks for joining us on the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. My guest today is Buddy Eleazor, and we are going to talk about Africa. Buddy has been to Africa 48 or 49 times on photo tours, so he has a lot of good insight for us. Now, the Understand Photography Show is a podcast, so if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook as a video, this is behind the scenes. So if you're wondering why we don't have any visuals, that's why. But please check out our show notes at understandphotography.com, and you'll see the Understand Photography Show. You can listen to older shows. You can see the notes. You can see pictures from our guests. And of course, there's a whole bunch of stuff on our website anyway. In fact, when you get there, the first thing you'll see is it says, click here for freebies. Click there, choose what you'd like. What are you interested in? Travel tips, unique gifts for photographer, how do you have tack sharp images every time? You'll have a selection. Of course, you can choose them all if you like. And in exchange, we ask for your email address and put you on our mailing list. We have a newsletter once a month. It's got photo tips and, of course, our schedule. We also have a couple of Facebook groups. We have our general group, Understand Photography Group, and also a group called Selling Your Photography as Art. So if you have, general questions, what kind of lens do I buy? Why is my camera, why are my pictures coming out blue? Whatever, any questions you have, or if you just want to share things, Understand Photography Group is the one you want. But if you're interested in making money selling your artwork, join Selling Your Photography as Art. You can reach both of those groups on our Facebook page. So it's facebook.com/understand photography. And you'll see down, well, who knows where Facebook keeps moving stuff. But right now it's down on the left-hand side. It says groups. You click there and you'll see our two groups. Now, Buddy Eleazor is an internationally acclaimed nature and wild photographer. He's been featured in National Geographic, in Popular Photography, and MSN News. He wins all kinds of photo competitions. He speaks at the different camera clubs and conventions and places like that, but he leads trips to Africa. Now, he doesn't just lead trips to Africa. He's a photo guide. He'll take you to Yellowstone, different places like that, but Africa is his thing. He's been there, well, by the time this airs, he will have been there 50 times, all over the entire continent. So he has a lot of good insight for us. So welcome, Buddy.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, thanks for being on. So give our audience a little bit of your background as it pertains to photography.
Well, I first went to Africa in 2005. When my son graduated college, I took him there as a graduation gift. And we both sort of got hooked in 2007. We went back again. And from there, I just had to keep going. So I've now led over 4 dozen trips to Africa, doing primarily Southern Africa, Namibia, Botswana, South Africa. But I also do Kenya's Masai Mara, areas like that. And again, I'm a photographer, so therefore I basically made my trips more focused on photography, although non-photographers seem to like to go too, because we don't have so many people in a vehicle and you get a more quality sighting when you are on a photo safari.
Wow. Now is that your job? Is you do photo workshops? That's your job?
Well, I guess you'd call it my job. I retired 9 years ago. From a big corporate organization, Fortune 200 company. I'm an engineer by background, and I wanted to give back, so I got very involved with some nonprofits in the area, photo clubs and art organizations, and people wanted to go with me on some of my trips to Africa, so I started organizing them. And I go anywhere from 4 to 7 times per year, and I take groups of 10 to 12 people. So it takes a good bit of my time, but I still like to think that I'm a retiree.
And you also do trips, photo tours at other places as well.
Right. I just came back from Yellowstone a week there, which was really great. And typically this time of the year through April, I'll also do a couple of trips down to Florida, over at Wakotahachie, Green Cay, and maybe up to the Vieira wetlands, that kind of area.
And just to let our audience know, and you know, this is not going to air, I think, until June. So
Okay.
but we're talking in February. We're
Well,
getting ahead of the game.
hey, guys from Africa then, because I'll be in Africa at that time.
Awesome. So I am actually, we do photo tours here at Understand Photography, and I'm doing my first trip to Africa, and I partnered up with a travel agency basically, and we organized the trip to South Africa. That'll come up in September, but
On
and
your web,
it's full. But if somebody wants to go to Africa, how, like, Africa's a whole continent. There are many different countries. How do you decide as a photographer, where should I go? Who would be a good leader? All that stuff. How do you make a decision like that? How do you do the research?
it is. And by the way, I did notice that you're going to Timbavati, which is a great, excellent area, especially for leopards and lions. And then you're going down to Cape Town, which is just one of the amazing cities of the world. So you've got a good trip planned. I'm sure you're going to have a good time. And
Yay.
that sort of gets you into how do you pick where you're going. What I like to do is try to find out what kind of animals, what kind of settings, what kind of sightings do people really want to have. If they want to see vast landscapes, then maybe you want to go to Chobe in Botswana, or maybe you want to go to Kenya or Tanzania. On the other hand, if you really want to see big cats and see them a lot, again, those areas, the private reserves outside of Kruger, such as Sabi Sands, Timbavati, Lisseri, are excellent for that. So I really try to get a handle on what people want to see. If they want to see indigenous species, then you'd go to Namibia. Each place has its own specialty.
Okay. All right. And you mostly are in the southern Africa when you go, you said?
Right. I typically do one trip a year to Kenya during the Great Migration, which is August, September timeframe. This year I'm going August 28th, and we'll be back September the 8th. And by the way, I don't know if I'll have spaces in June, but I have spaces right now still available for that one. But most of my trips are to Botswana and South Africa. And then every second year, I like to go to Namibia. Namibia is a beautiful country, but it's a big country and takes a lot of traveling. So I sort of spaced that one out a little bit.
Okay. Okay. So if you want to see the big five, basically, what's the best country to go to?
You want to see
Or
the
what's
big,
the best area?
if you want to see the big five, you definitely want to look at Southern Africa, because it's very rare to really get great rhino sightings in the Masai Mara or the Serengeti. On the other hand, again, in those private reserves around Kruger or down in Zamanga, which is south of Kruger, or even in Madikwe, which is east of Johannesburg, those areas all have quite a number of rhinos, as well as lots of elephants, lions, leopards, and Cape buffalo, which are the big five.
Okay, so tell me the big five again.
Cape buffalo, elephants, leopards, lions, and rhino. I had to think for a second on that third one.
You started with it last time.
Yeah, there's two species of rhino. There's the black rhino and the white rhino.
And is one in a different place than the other?
Yeah, technically, the big five is supposed to be the black rhino, but they've sort of broadened it. The white rhino is more commonly seen in South Africa. The black rhino we see quite a lot in Namibia, and also the black rhino is what you would see if you do see one in the Serengeti or the Masai Mara.
Oh, wow. Wow. What about hippopotamuses? Where are they?
Hippos are everywhere except Namibia. You can find them in a reserve called Orindi in Namibia, but otherwise, if you go to Zimbabwe, Botswana, South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, you'll see plenty of hippos. The challenge there is the guides respect hippos more than any other animal, probably, in that they're a little bit unpredictable. Sometimes they're docile, and sometimes they're incredibly aggressive. So they tend to want to stay their distance away from them a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I've always heard that they were, very mean or whatever. They look so cute.
If you do want to see hippos and you want to photograph them, actually, the one place I would highly recommend to people is to go up on the Chobe River in northern Botswana, or else go into Zambia, at South Luangwa. Both places you basically can photograph them from boats, so you get a nice low angle when they lift out of the water and open their mouth and everything. And it's a pretty exciting experience to see them when they're fighting in the water and you're in the water too. So I highly recommend that if you really want to see hippos.
You're in the water? How close?
You're in a boat. The boats are about 9 meters long by about 3 meters wide. So in other words, about 35 feet by 6 feet wide. And you can shoot them pretty easily with a 100 to 400 millimeter lens. So you're in that kind of a range.
Wow. Have you ever been like too close?
They charge the boat occasionally. Luckily, our guides want to get home safely each night too, so they're very quick to gun the motor and get us out of there if a hippo is to charge. It's a great, but again, it's when you want to get out of there.
Oh my gosh. So do you have a favorite park or favorite area?
Well, my first love was definitely Chobe. That's where I went the first 2 times I went, and I love the vastness of the big wide river and the islands that emerge from that in the late summer of our late summer, their late winter. So I guess I would have to say Chobe, although again, I do love big cats too, and so for that reason, I also like going in southern Africa to those places I mentioned earlier, like around the Kruger.
Now, when you talked about Kruger, you said the private reserves around Kruger. What's the difference?
Yeah, it's a big deal. Kruger's a national park. It's huge. It's about the size of Delaware. The problem with the main Kruger is that you have to stay on the roads, and a lot of the roads basically have other tourists on them. So when there is a major sighting, there's a buildup of traffic around that particular sighting. A lot of people crowding in trying to see that sighting. On the other hand, surrounding Kruger and with no fences between them and Kruger are what's called the private reserves, and there's about a half a dozen of those. Sabi Sands is a famous one, Timbavati is a famous one, Thorny Bush is one, Kaseri. And in those, you have to go out on game drive vehicles provided by the lodges. And even more importantly, they limit the number of vehicles at a sighting to 2 to 3, depending on how relaxed the animals are. So you can really have a more private experience. And also we can do off-road tracking. So when the guide sees tracks going off into the bush for a major sighting, we go off-road too until we find the animal. So it's really a pretty special experience.
Oh, wow. Is it, I would imagine there's a huge cost difference.
Well, yes and no. I mean, obviously the biggest cost on many safaris is just getting to Africa. But once you're there, it's probably going to cost you an extra $100 a night to be in one of the private reserves. But again, it's well worth it because you're going to be in an open vehicle. You're going to have only, if it's a photo safari, 1 or 2 people per row. So you've got ample, room to here. You can look left, you can look right without any obstructions. If you drive yourself, it's sort of hard to look through the windows of a rental car and get a really good view. Plus, the crowds are bigger. So I really recommend the private reserves.
Yeah, for $100 a day. If you're going all the way to Africa, it seems like it'd be worth it to, if you're there 7 days, that's $700. Yeah, that's a lot of money, but for the experience, wow.
For sure. Wow. I mean, beds are beds, food is food, and so you can get those at good places, both just outside of the national parks in the public areas as well as the private reserves. But the experience is just more intimate in every way. You're with a smaller group of people. You're feeling more remote. It gives you that real feel of Africa, and that's what you're going to enjoy it.
Now, how far in advance do you have to reserve one of these private?
That's a very good question. Also, in the old days, meaning only 2 or 3 years ago, I could book right now a reserve for, let's say, July and be able to get 6 or 7 rooms, even if I wanted to, for a group of people. This year, Europe has done pretty well with the economy. Asia is doing better with their economy. So the booking is well in advance. I'm already grabbing rooms for 2021, and I've already got people signing up for 2021. And my trips for April and May of this year, they were sold out probably last August. So, you know, you need to book at least 6 or 8 months in advance if you're one of the people going. And if you're leading a safari, you need to be booking the place a full year in advance.
Yeah, our deadline was over a year in advance because we're staying at a very exclusive lodge and they only have 8 rooms.
And
So,
that's the advantage of these small private reserves is a lot of the lodges are what I call boutique lodges. It's not uncommon for them to only have 6 to 7 rooms maximum. And so if you go with a group that maybe is a group of 12, then you're going to put those on 2 vehicles where you have plenty of space and you're going to have the entire lodge to yourself.
yeah, it's very appealing. But yeah, I couldn't believe it when she told me that deadline. But that's the way it is, I guess. I guess, there's just, it's the law of supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
So
And
okay, so if I'm going to go to your favorite area, which is, tell me again,
Chobe National Park,
Kobe?
Chobe,
I'm sorry, would you repeat?
Hobe, Chobe National Park. It's northern Botswana. It's near the Okavango Delta.
When's the best time of year to go there?
Okay. In general, for all of Southern Africa, which again is a major area that I lead, all my trips are between the 1st of May and essentially the middle of October. And the reason for that is right now over there, it's very hot, it's very rainy, and quite frankly, it's buggy. The rains will stop in March, and it will not rain again there until the end of November. So it just gets drier and drier, which basically means limited number of water holes, means all the animals have to come to those limited water holes. So the sightings are better. Also, because it's dry, it's generally bug free. You know, you go that time of year, you don't even see mosquitoes.
Wow.
Yeah,
So they're opposite of us. They're
right.
winter.
It's winter here, it's summer there.
Okay. What about the rest of, like, if you wanted to go to Tanzania or something?
That's a little bit different. You know, in general, when people think of Tanzania and Kenya, they tend to gravitate to thinking about the Great Migration, which is 2 million wildebeest that do a giant circle year round, going from Tanzania clockwise up into the Masai Mara of Kenya and then back down into the southern Tanzania to birth again. The birthing of the wildebeest is about now, February, March. And so if you see big pastures of thousands and thousands of animals and lots of predation, then it's a good time to go to Tanzania right now. On the other
So
hand,
February, March.
right. On the other hand, they start heading north at the end of March, and they're sort of spread out during that time frame. So the next time you really want to go is July, August, September, which is when they start congregating again in the very north in the Masai Mara of Kenya. And that's where you see the river crossings that are sort of famous on TV. You also see a lot of predation then because, again, the predators also know these animals are crossing the river and more vulnerable. So you see a lot of lions, leopards, cheetah in that area if you go July, August, September.
So it sounds like you need to go in August and just stay through October and do the whole continent.
That's a bad thing to do. Actually,
So,
also be going in November, and that's a little bit late, and it'll be getting a little bit warm. But again, the rains haven't come yet, hopefully. And by going in early November, I'm going to get to see a lot of bird migration, carmine bee eaters in particular. But I'm also going to get to see the time of the year when the impalas give birth, and that's sort of special because everybody loves photos of babies.
boy, that's for sure. And that's in November
Right.
in
It's
the Chobe area.
all over southern Africa. All the impalas get what's called synchronized birthing. Basically, their way of protecting the babies is for them all to give birth at once in the same week. And by doing that, the predators can't eat them all. So therefore, a lot of the young impala are able to make it.
Wow, that's amazing. So all over the entire South Africa area, they all have babies within a week.
Pretty much, yeah. You know, again, it may be the first week in northern Botswana and it may be the second week in the Kruger area. But in general, for the region, all the impalates will be given synchronized birthing, as well as many of the other species birth at that time too.
That's amazing. So, all right. So let's say we've decided we're going to Chobe, right? That's your favorite area. And that's known for what? Tell me again.
Chobe is incredibly famous for, well, it's a waterfront. So
Okay.
it's very, very famous for animals coming down to the water. It's famous for hippos, but in particular, in that area, there are over 60,000 elephants. So
Oh, wow.
elephant, you'll see 50 of them drinking at night all together at the edge of the water.
That's so cool. So what if we're going there, what do we bring? What kind of camera gear?
When you go to Chobe, you can go two ways. You can either go on the water or on land. And normally what I do with my groups is about 2/3 of the time we go on the water to photograph, and about 1/3 of the time we go on game drive vehicles on the land. Both is excellent. The advantage of the water, though, as you can imagine, is you see more water bird life, as well as you actually can get closer to the wildlife, because when you're in a boat, the animals don't see you as any type of threat, and they let you get quite close. They're very what they call chill. They're relaxed. So, I recommend for large animals something again in the 100 to 400 millimeter range on a full frame equivalent. And then if you're really into birds, there's a lot of beautiful, colorful, smaller birds that you might need a little bit more lens. So either putting a teleconverter on that or even going to a 600 millimeter lens.
Okay, so that's interesting. I always thought the longer the better, but I spoke to the guide for our safari in Timbati, is that how you say it?
Timbavati.
Timbavati. And he said, "Oh, don't bring anything too long because they're really close, the animals."
You're going to have lions and leopards where their tails rub up against the vehicles they walk past.
Oh my God, that's just kind of scary.
These animals, the Kruger was formed in the late 50s, and the private reserves came into existence about 10 years after that. And so these cats, the parents of these cats and the great grandparents of these cats are used to seeing people not as a threat and not as part of the food chain, but just as something that's going through the park. They totally ignore you. It's no big deal to the vehicles, going past the animals on a kill or when they're walking or anything. They're very relaxed.
Wow. Now when you are okay, so you're in a boat. How are you keeping your camera steady?
The boats we use are actually designed for photography. They're flat bottom boats, and all the seats are in line. So there's 8 seats per boat, and they're in a vertical row. Each chair actually has a gimbal mount attached to it. So you can attach your camera if you want to stabilize it that way. But the river is moving very, very slowly anyway. So handhelding is not really a big deal. It's pretty easily done.
Wow, even with the big lens.
Yeah, yeah. Again, you
Ah,
can also get really, really low. You can get out of your seat and get down on the floor and put your lens on what they call the gunnel of the boat, the edge of the boat, and get right at water level and photograph jacanas and malachite kingfishers that are, flitting about right on the surface of the water.
wow, that sounds so cool. And in the vehicle on land is the same thing. They have mounts.
Vehicle, right? They actually do. The land vehicles that we use in Chobe are a little bit different than the ones you'll see in South Africa. And they have little ledges that with bean bags on them that you support your camera on. So it's pretty stable to use any size lens in those vehicles also. But your guide was right in that you don't want too much lens. I see a lot of people that go on safari with me get 100 pictures identical of a portrait of an elephant, let's say. You don't need 100. You need a couple of nice ones, but you also need a sense of place, and you need to photograph details. So you really want to use a wide angle lens some so that you can sort of get a picture of the entire environment the animal's living in. And then you also want your full zoom up to maybe 400, zoom in on details like the tusk or maybe the tail or the foot.
Okay. Now, is landscape photography, that's not the right area for that, right?
Not where you're going, no. Southern Africa in general is a little bit messier. They call it the bush, and they call it the bush for a reason. It's more brushy with Mopani forest. The Timbavati, being a floodplain, is wide open and vast, so it's good for landscapes. And then, I mentioned Tanzania and Kenya. They are wide open with lone trees and maybe a bird in the tree, or maybe a giraffe nibbling on the tree. Makes for some great landscapes.
Where are those really cool trees? What are they called?
Umbrella trees, probably, or it could be one or two. The two most famous trees are the umbrella acacia tree, and those you would see primarily up in Eastern Africa. Or the other one could be the baobab, which is the tree of life. It's about 10 feet in diameter. Some people call it the upside down tree. And those you'll see in both Botswana and South Africa.
Okay, those are the ones I was thinking of. So I'll have to look the other one up.
Yeah, baobabs are often 1,000 years old too. They're very old trees.
Wow, that is so cool. Now let's talk about safety, because South Africa is not known for being a safe area. So how do you keep your customers safe, and how do you keep your gear from getting stolen? What do you got to do?
Well, when you look at safety, and in particular safety relative to tourism, most, if not all, of the problems that I've ever heard about are in the cities. Johannesburg is a city you often arrive in, but you don't stay there long. Some people add an extra day maybe to visit Soweto or to do something in the city. But in general, we're staying in the lodge or the hotel area when we're in Johannesburg, and then we're flying out the very next morning into the bush. And once you're in these private reserves, you're 100% safe, because quite frankly, it's totally fenced, it's got guns, and it's got lions between you and anybody that will want to rob you. So you're pretty safe.
Is there any tips though? I guess just normal tips, and when you are in Johannesburg, and Cape Town is a little safer.
Cape Town is a little safer in the tourist areas. As a whole, you'll see a good bit of crime reported in Cape Town, but it's in the more rural areas, or these areas they call townships, where sometimes the more poor people live. In the main tourist areas, they police that pretty. In particular, there's an area called the V&A, the Victoria and Albert waterfront. You're quite safe there from anything other than maybe worrying about pickpockets, because they keep a good eye on that. They live on their tourism business, and they want to keep that a clean, safe area.
Yeah, that's how I'm from Detroit originally, and that you could go to Greektown and it was nice and safe, but man, you stepped a couple of blocks off. No, you just didn't do that. So I guess it's, any big city, there's going to be crime. You got to be careful, right?
Exactly.
All right. So,
yeah, I feel safe in Cape Town, but I stay to the main tourist areas, or with a large group, as opposed to an individual wandering into strange areas.
yes. Okay. What about, how do you carry all that gear to Africa? I mean, do you bring a lot? You bring the 100 to 400 and a wide lens and a couple of cameras.
It's one of the challenges, is to think and pack smartly. The first thing I would recommend is don't bring many clothes. First off, all the lodges have laundry services, so you really only need a couple of pairs of pants and a couple of shirts. And even if you're going into Cape Town or into Johannesburg, again, that same casual clothes you wear in the bush, you can wear in those cities too. They're used to tourists doing that. It's not a big deal. So pack lightly on the clothes. On the camera gear, you need your camera gear. And you probably also want to take a laptop to store your images. So that's where you're going to have your weight. Again, most of my trips, I'm taking a telephoto, a mid-range zoom, and a wide angle. So something like a 100 to 400, something like a 24-105, and something wide like in the 14 millimeter range. And the wide is really for night sky photography. I don't take much more than that, maybe a teleconverter. I shoot Olympus as of last year, so my gear is much smaller than the average person's, but I do take two camera bodies regardless. You never know when one's going to fail. I've never had one fail, but these are trips of a lifetime, so you want to keep shooting, so you definitely want a second camera body with you. The two camera bodies, one telephoto, one medium range, one wide angle, and a laptop to make sure you store your pictures.
Now you don't need a tripod though.
Most of the lodges that we do night sky photography in have a couple of tripods they can loan to us. I don't recommend a tripod inside the game drive vehicles. All they do is get in the way. Bean bags are better, and the lodges and the vehicles usually have bean bags available for you to use. If you need support, that's really the route you want to go, with a bean bag.
Okay, so we don't have to lug the tripod anyway, is my whole point, right?
No, again, unless you're doing night photography and want to use your own tripod, and even there, you're using a wide angle lens, so therefore you're not putting a lot of weight on the tripod, so a lighter weight travel tripod is perfectly fine.
Okay, all right. So do you use a backpack?
I do have a backpack. I use a classic, the Kruger backpack. It's one of my favorites. It was developed by a friend of mine, Andy Biggs, and it's an excellent backpack.
And you can carry that on.
Yeah, you can. The only places that we really have weight restrictions that I worry about are if you're having to take a bush plane into a location. And that applies when you're going into the Okavango Delta in Botswana, or when you're flying into the Masai Mara in Kenya. Otherwise, fairly major airlines take you to fairly major airports. For example, when you go to Timbavati, you'll fly from Johannesburg to a town called Hoedspruit. There, everybody's allowed to check 50-pound bag, plus they can carry on their camera gear. And they're pretty lenient about the camera gear thing because, again, they know that it's tourism. They know that you're a photographer, and they don't want to check that expensive stuff in the hold anyway, so they let you bring it on board.
Okay, that's good. So, all right. So how many times have you been to Africa? Do you even know?
Well, it'll actually be my 50th trip when I go in April.
Oh my gosh. Do you have any memorable moments that you want to tell me about?
Well, there's a couple. Don't do this at home, folks. One in particular, a friend of mine, Brendan, is a guide there, and he knows me well and knows my ability well. And I was going with a group to Zamanga in southern Africa, and there were wild dogs running down the road toward us. And Brendan said, "Buddy, you can get out of the vehicle. Everybody else stay in the vehicle." Buddy lay down on the ground. So I'm thinking, oh wow, I'm going to get a low-angle shot of wild dogs running past. This is going to be super cool. Not any longer. I had just gotten on the ground, and he drives away and leaves me there. And as he's starting, he's saying, "Whatever you do, don't get up." Oh shoot! So I shoot. The dogs pause as they run past me, and then they run on. I get my picture, and then he comes back. And I said, "What would have happened if I stood up?" He goes, "Oh, the dogs would have run away. You wouldn't have gotten the shot."
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez.
Again, they don't see man as part of the food chain.
Oh my gosh. But that had to be scary.
That had me nervous. And then there was one other time we were around some cheetah, and the female cheetah had been raised by man in this particular reserve. So you could get out of the vehicle again with this female cheetah, and she had subadult youth around them, and they were feeding. And I decided to be smart and use my 14mm lens and put it right over the top of them and get a photo shooting downward right on top of all these cheetah. It was going to be a pretty cool shot, and I did get the shot. But I didn't think about the fact that these things have big, heavy tails, and they need the big tails because when they run fast and change direction, they need a counterbalance to balance them. So the cheetah's tail is much longer and heavier than you would expect. And I know that one of them swung their tail around and knocked me off my feet, and I hit the ground right in the middle of their food. And laying on the ground with 6 cheetahs surrounding me was not a very comfortable feeling. But again, all they did was the female hissed. They backed up a little bit. I got up, and everything was fine.
Oh my God, that would have been scary though, huh? I saw like YouTube videos where, there'd be a safari vehicle and a cheetah would jump up on the vehicle with all the tourists. That would be scary.
That happens in Tanzania and Kenya some. Again, you have closed game drive vehicles there with a pop-top roof that you photograph out of. And it's become sort of a tourist thing to encourage. The reason the cheetah do that is they're always looking for the highest ground to search out where they're going to hunt. And so if there's a termite mound handy, then the vehicle's the next best high thing they can jump on top of. I understand they really discourage, I've never had that happen, but I understand they try to discourage that because, being slick, the vehicle, its paint job is not rough. And so the animal can slip and fall and maybe hurt itself. Um, Not to mention it's more risky to tourists, but they really discourage that. But I've seen those photos myself too.
Yeah, looks scary. All right, so what are some of the common photo mistakes people make when they go to wherever, anywhere?
Well, I think you need to have a methodology when you shoot. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people will stop at the first sighting or two, and suddenly I hear click, 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 click from the same person for 5 minutes. And I know they're not changing their settings. They're shooting the same thing over and over and over again. And again, you want a sharp image, so you may want to take it once or twice, and you want the right head angle, so maybe a few more. But you only need so many, so you really need to go in with a bit of a methodology. For example, for me, I get what I call the safe shot first, which is a composition you wouldn't mind sharing with your friends when you get home that sort of shows the animal. And
Uh-huh.
then I change it around. I get in tight and try to look at a detail on the animal, or I get wider and try to get that sense of place shot for the animal. Or if the animal's moving, I'll slow my shutter speed down and try to get a pan shot of the animal so that I can sort of evoke that motion that the animal's doing. But you need to vary it, and that's the key. Is so many people when they go, they don't push themselves to try other types of shots. There's so many things you can do, and again, a good guide will talk to you about these. Instead of shooting all the time with the light to your back, you want to shoot into the sun sometimes and get rim lighting, or you want to get silhouettes at sunset, or you want to get side lighting that's really strong and push push the exposure either direction so that you either get high key or low key kind of shots.
Okay, all right. When I lead photo tours, I usually have a little cheat sheet with me just so I remember what to tell people to do. Because sometimes I'll remember, but I forget to tell them, or else I won't even remember myself. So that I'm gonna take what you just said and put it on a little piece of paper to keep in my pocket.
You definitely should. I actually laminate that and give it out to the clients. But
Do you
basically,
really?
yeah, it's the safe shot, it's the sense of place shot, it's the tight shot with detail, it's the pan action shot, it's the rim light shot, the backlight shot, and the side light shot. Those are the 7.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I think you're right though. I know a lady here. I ran into her. She was getting a book made at the printer, the photo lab, and the book was 25 shots of a lion, exactly the same. And I was thinking, why is she putting all these pictures in the same picture in the book? But she did just what you said, same picture over and over.
You take this picture behind me here. This is what they call a Kalahari lion. And, I got the tight shot on his face, yes, but before I got that, he was standing next to his brother, and I got a picture of the two of them together. And then before I got the tight shot, I also zoomed back even more and got them with the entire pride and the sun setting back behind them. So, even in this particular shot, which is the one that ended up being the one I printed, I had 3 or 4 different variations of that particular pride of lions.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a proponent of taking too many pictures because it's digital. You can just throw them away, but then you have to narrow it down. But I think your idea of getting just variety is the right thing to do. Um, so any other mistakes that we should really be, or anything we need to be aware of as we're out there photographing?
Yeah, another one that came to mind as you were asking is exposure and exposure compensation. The light there is much more harsh than we have in the eastern United States. It's more like when you're shooting the Southwest. The reds are a little more saturated, the bright things are a little bit brighter. And a lot of these animals, maybe you'll have a very bright area of them, and yet part of them will be very, very dark. So you really need to watch your exposure. In general, in South Africa, you end up for many of your shots underexposing a third to 2/3 of the stop as sort of a baseline. So really watch your exposure. If you're shooting a mirrorless, that's great because you can have your histogram showing in your viewfinder and you can keep an eye on what your exposure is.
Okay, that's good advice. That's yeah, I didn't even think about that, but the light is probably pretty harsh, isn't it?
It is. And
Okay.
a little bit in Florida with your birds. When you're shooting a wood stork or an egret, you're going to expose them a lot different than if you're shooting a tricolor or a great blue heron.
Oh, that's for sure. White birds, especially if they're in the mangroves or someplace dark, if
Exactly.
you're using, if you're not using spot metering, you're going to be in trouble. That's for sure. So, um, is that something that you advise, spot metering, or?
Either one, depends on how good you are at reading the light when you look through the viewfinder. Spot metering is excellent, but again, if you're just cognizant of the bright and dark areas, and if you're an experienced photographer, average weighting is fine also. It really
Okay.
depends on your own personal style there, I think.
Okay. Anything else on things we need to watch out for?
Changing lenses, again, I'll take two bodies and I actually keep two different length lenses on both bodies, and I use them both, even though one of them is designated as my backup. Um, It is a dusty place because it is dry. I mentioned the rains stop in March and it's not going to come again until, November. So it gets very, very dry there. And being dry, that means dust. So do not change the lenses when the vehicle is still moving. Wait till he's totally stopped, let the dust settle around the vehicle, and then it's safe to change your lens. And related to that, a lot of people start clicking as soon as we show up on a scene and the engine of the vehicle is still running. That little bit of vibration from a vehicle is not going to help your picture. And in just a second, he's going to turn the key off and shut down the car. Wait for him to shut off the vehicle before you start shooting.
Okay. Well, you're full of good stuff. Anything else?
That pretty much covers the keys to photography there. Again, be creative and have some fun.
Yeah,
Birds.
yeah.
Birds. The bird, I could not sell this as a birding trip for most Americans. You go there to see big mammals. But trust me, you'll come back with hundreds of pictures of birds, and they're very colorful birds, much more colorful than the average American bird. So I anticipate you'll be shooting a lot of bird shots, and you will be shooting a lot of shots. That's another thing is I have a lot of people go and all they want to do is take a couple of cards. They don't think they need a laptop. Some even say they're going to upload to the cloud. Wi-Fi is not fast enough to be uploading to the cloud there as far as a
Okay.
regular backup method, and you're going to shoot a lot more shots than you think. It's digital, as you mentioned. A lot of these cameras have frame rates around 10 frames per second now. A lot of these files are getting larger and larger. So I highly advise bringing a laptop and even a backup external drive to back up your photos each day or each 2 days. You're going to shoot 1,000 shots a day if you're having a good game drive.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I believe it. I know, I'm a working photographer and it's really easy to shoot 1,000 shots in
Yeah,
a few hours.
yeah.
And
I
that's
people
that's that's just a boring stuff.
And first time there in particular, you're going to be excited and you're going to think you're Darwin trying to document every animal and every species. So you're going to click a lot of shots that are not keepers. That's okay. Again, it's digital. And you'll settle down. And as you get further into it, the quality of your shots will improve. But do realize you're going to want to document everything. So you're going to shoot everything.
Yeah. So bring lots of big cards and a way to back them up.
Right. I'm a big fan of solid state drives, less moving parts. And I'm a big fan of solid state external drives also.
Yeah. And you can just bring an external drive and plug it into your laptop, right?
Correct. Yeah. USB.
I this summer before or last summer before I went away, I had the 2 summers before that I bought a laptop that was, supposed to be the best laptop for travel and it wasn't. It's a great laptop, but it's heavy. So I bought a little Microsoft Surface Pro this year and Joe who works here, he's like, "Oh, you don't need that. It doesn't have enough memory. It doesn't have any storage." But I traveled with that. It weighs, I think, 2 pounds. I traveled with that and a detachable hard drive, and it was awesome. It was just so lightweight, and I had all the storage I needed. I didn't really do any editing. I just used it for storage, so it was great. It was fine.
And that's a little bit of a question there too. I use my laptop over there primarily as almost a conduit to get things from my card over to my external hard drives. I'm not doing a lot of editing in the field either. I do edit a few pictures here and there as examples to people. But a lot of the clients want me to do a little bit of a portfolio review every day or two just to see if I see trends in their photography to help them out. And so they're going to maybe show pictures on their laptop. But that said, you still can do that easily on a 13-inch. You don't need a 17-inch laptop, that's for sure.
Yeah, that was definitely a mistake I made because that laptop, and I think it weighs 4.5 pounds, which doesn't sound that heavy, but boy, it sure does feel heavy when you're carrying it around on your back with all your camera gear.
It does, and as I mentioned, if you're going to Okavango or if you're going to East Africa and you're starting to have weight limits on your travel, you know, that extra 2 or 3 pounds is a pretty important 2 or 3 pounds.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Anything else? What if you could summarize like top however many tips for a photography, not just a safari, but a photography trip in general to Africa?
Well, in general, again, if you don't ask questions or ask for help, you're not going to get as much as you need. And whoever is leading your group probably doesn't know your specific skills or your limitations. So therefore, the more you talk to the leader before the trip, as well as on the trip, and get them to understanding the type of photography you do, how advanced you are as a photographer, what kind of equipment you're shooting, the more he can help you on the trip. And I think that's really important because, again, I've been 48 times to Africa. I've got the safe shot of an elephant standing there, but maybe you haven't. Maybe you don't know what you should be shooting there. You know, I tend to try to call out my camera settings, you know, my shutter speed, my f-stop, my ISO, my exposure compensation. But it's more than that. It's, you know, reminding people, you know, look at the eyelash and how the light's hitting the eyelash of that elephant. Look at the tusk and how the left tusk is worn more than the right tusk because he's a left-handed elephant. Or, look at the bird that's on his back that's, you know, eating off parasites and get a good shot of that bird also. You know, the more you talk to them, the more you talk or the more your leader talks, the more you're going to get a diverse set of pictures and better quality pictures.
And one of the nice things I would imagine is that you almost have a captive audience, because I know, you know, we were doing photo trips to Cuba, and I have this one story that, you know, in Cuba, you have to hire a government guide if you want to do it legally. So their job is to take you places to spend money. So they take you off, you know, off the itinerary because they see an opportunity to get you to spend money. So the last time we were there, the guide took us to the fort at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon with the sun blasting at us. It was horrible time of day to be there for photography. So I said, you know what? I know what to do, you guys. We're going to have a cool shot. And we all, except for the people who wandered off, got one of the coolest shots of the trip because I had them turn night into day with the white balance, underexposed. So it looked like it was nighttime with the moon instead of the sun. And it came out so cool. And everybody was so excited, except those people who wandered off and didn't stay with the leader.
That brings up another important tip, though, on your trip. You know, when you first go out in the morning or in the afternoon, typically on a safari, you have 2 game drives. You have one that starts about sunrise and goes till 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning. Then you have one that starts around 3 in the afternoon and goes till sunset and a little beyond sunset. So when you go out in the morning, it's a little bit darker, shooting higher ISOs. You can shoot moody things. It's, you know, that golden hour kind of photography. But toward the end of that morning game drive, the light is beginning to get a little bit harsh. When the light starts getting harsh, start thinking maybe this is better as a black and white photo, and sort of mentally think I'm going to convert this to a black and white when I get home. And same when you first go out in the afternoon game drives. Again, you're trying to get out there, be in position when the sun sets, but you're possibly going to run into a great sighting within the first 100 yards when you leave the lodge. Mentally think when the light is harsh, this might be best as a black and white when I get back.
Oh, that is good advice. Yeah, sometimes you know, sometimes you're out in bad lighting there. You got to be creative. And I always tell people it's such a good idea to shoot with other photographers because other photographers have different ideas and you learn so much.
Right. You know, you mentioned that you've sort of got a captive audience. Well, on most game drives, we're going, again, in East Africa, we have 3 to 4 clients per vehicle because of the type of vehicle it is. And in Southern Africa, we have 6 clients per vehicle. In case you have never looked at the pictures of what the game drive vehicles are like, basically there's a seat beside the guide, which is where I'd be sitting. And then there's 3 bench rows behind that. And so it's designed that you could take 3 people per each of those rows. And on a photo safari, we put a maximum of 2 per row for those other rows. So bottom line is you have 6 people in the vehicle that are clients, and then you have the leader. That's a small group, and you're out there alone. So talk. You know, if you have questions, ask him. Again, he's going to give you advice freely. But there's other photographers on that vehicle that have a certain amount of photo experience too. Ask them if they have ideas. Talk to them about what are they trying to shoot, what are they trying to get. They may open up ideas to you hadn't even thought about shooting, including the leader hadn't thought about, quite frankly.
Yeah, yeah, I bet you're right. Okay, what else? What else? Did I interrupt you when you were doing your tips? I think we went off on a tangent.
I think I did. Sorry, I do that a lot. I
So
meander.
do I.
You got a list of questions there. Check. I'm not sure.
I think we covered a lot. What about now? Now this is not going to air till June, remember? So what projects do you have coming up?
Again, before this airs, I will be going in April, a really special safari. I'm going, I mentioned Masamara is best in June, July, and August. Well, in April, it's their rainy season, and they have fairly violent thunderstorms a couple of times during the days that time of the year. So I'm going to take a group then. I want to get pictures of animals being pelted in rain. I want to get pictures of lightning in the background. I want to get more drama, more excitement in my photos. Again, it's not for the average first-time traveler, but 6 people that are going with me all have been to Africa numerous times before, and we want something different, something a little more powerful. That's sort of cool. And then May, I'm going to a reserve called Zamanga, where we're photographing out of hides that are at water level, including overnight hides, where we literally have beds in the hide underground, and we sleep there all night, photographing at the water hole during the middle of the night. That's pretty cool too. Then I go again in November for the synchronized birthing of the impala, so that'll be cool. Those are my cool ones of 2020. 2021 will be a little bit different. I'll be adding Namibia to the trip, which again I do every couple of years, which is amazing landscape photography, some really cool animal shots, and also indigenous people. Sand Bushmen, the Herero, and the Himba, which are the 3 main photo people opportunities in Namibia.
Wow. Wow. And where can we find you? What's your website?
My website is for my safaris is magnumexcursions.com. Right here on my shirt somewhere. Yeah, magnumexcursions.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, both as Magnum Excursions and also as Buddy Eleazor. That's BUDDYELEAZER. And I try to post a wildlife picture every day on Facebook and Instagram. So there'll always be different. The beauty of getting thousands of pictures is you end up with hundreds to post on Facebook. So, for example, I was just in Yellowstone last week, and I finished my editing of the Yellowstone pictures, and I think I came up with 56 keepers. So that's 56 days worth of images I can post right there. I did see the interview you did with the person that's leading your particular trip, and I forgot why I wanted to mention that, but you're going to have a good trip. I liked your itinerary quite a bit.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited. Especially I've never been there, so it's exciting. So thank you so much. Well, thank you for being on the Understand Photography show.
It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed the time with you.
So to the audience, if you'd leave us a review on iTunes, we'd really, really appreciate it. I'm Peggy Farron. Thank you so much for watching the Understand Photography Show. We will see you next week.
Get up!